Titulo. 22. Stop mowing. Natives that kill weeds fast. Have you ever looked at your lawn after a long weekend of pulling weeds and thought, there has to be a better way? I've been there more times than I care to admit. I remember spending a fortune at Home Depot on those heavy bags of weed and feed, lugging them across my yard in the humidity of July, only to watch the dandelions and crabgrass come back stronger just 2 weeks later. It felt like I was fighting a war against my own backyard, and frankly, I was losing. But here's the truth that nobody tells you at the big box stores. Most of those showcase grasses we plant are essentially helpless. They're like high-maintenance guests that need constant feeding, watering, and protection. Meanwhile, the weeds, they're the local tough guys. They know the soil, they love the heat, and they'll take over the second you turn your back because they actually belong here. The secret to winning this fight isn't more chemicals or more back-breaking labor. It's about changing the players on the field. We're talking about rewilding, the process of replacing those weak, struggling spots with native plants that actually fight back. Today, I'm going to show you how to use the living mulch strategy with natives that outcompete invasives by simply being better at living in your zip code than the weeds are. By the end of this journey, you'll know the powerhouse plants that can reclaim your soil while you sit back with a cold drink. We're covering everything from the dense shade dwellers that choke out creeping Charlie to the sun lovers that leave no room for invasive grasses. I'll also share a simple finger test that tells you exactly if a spot is ready for a native takeover or if you're just throwing money away. If you've ever felt like you have a black thumb because your lawn is a mess, let me validate you right now. It's not your fault. You've just been given bad advice and fragile plants. The plant at the nursery lives in a different reality, a temperature-controlled greenhouse with perfect misting. Your home is the real world. I want to save you the money and frustration I spent during my first 5 years of gardening. I'll shorten your path so you don't suffer for nothing. Let's dive into our first warrior, wild ginger, Asarum canadense. Now, don't let the delicate-looking heart-shaped leaves fool you. In the gardening world, this is a velvet hammer. If you have a shady corner under an old oak or a spot on the side of the house where grass just goes to die and moss takes over, this is your best friend. I used to try and force fescue in these dark spots, and every year, the weeds would just march right through the thin, struggling blades. Then I planted wild ginger. What makes it a fighter? It grows in a dense, low mat that looks like a lush green carpet. The leaves are broad and slightly fuzzy, acting like a natural umbrella. This is the key to weed suppression. Most weed seeds, like the dreaded garlic mustard or even common clover, need a hit of direct sunlight to germinate. Wild ginger says, not today. It creates such a thick canopy, just a few inches off the ground, that the soil stays dark and cool. It's essentially a living mulch that grows itself. One mistake I made early on, and I want to protect you from this, was planting them too far apart to save a few dollars. If you leave more than 12 inches between these guys in the beginning, the weeds will find those sunny gaps and move in. Space them about 8 to 10 inches apart, and within 2 seasons, you'll have a carpet so thick that even a stray dandelion seed won't find a place to land. Another thing I love about wild ginger is that it's incredibly hardy across most USDA zones in the eastern and midwestern US. It doesn't care about the humidity of a Georgia summer or the chill of a Pennsylvania spring. It just sits there, looking lush and keeping the ground occupied. And for those of you with furry friends, it's generally considered safe and non-toxic for pets wandering the yard. But here's the protector tip. When you buy these at a local nursery, they might look a bit small and sleepy in their pots. Don't panic, and don't overwater them out of guilt. They spend their first year putting down a massive root system. I almost dug mine up thinking they were duds, but by year 2, they exploded. It's that old gardening adage: the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. If you can be patient for just 1 season, you'll never have to buy mulch for that shady spot again. You're not just planting a flower, you're installing a security system for your soil. You might be wondering why some areas of your yard seem like weed magnets, even when you think you're doing everything right. Often, it's because the soil is actually too bare, inviting the most aggressive invaders to fill the vacuum. In the next part, I'll show you the sun-loving native that acts like a ground-level task force to reclaim those hot, baked areas of your yard that currently belong to the weeds. You know why this happens even when you water correctly. I'll show you the reason in the next part. You know why this happens even when you water correctly. It's because the weeds in your yard are better adapted to the local water cycles than your lawn is. Most of the grass we buy in the US, like Kentucky bluegrass, is actually from Europe or Asia. It needs a massive amount of intervention to stay green. When you water, you're often just feeding the weeds that are waiting in the wings. This brings us to our second native warrior, and this one is a personal favorite for those sunny, high-traffic areas: wild strawberry, Fragaria virginiana. Now, don't confuse this with the mock strawberry you see in the hardware store catalogs with those tasteless upright berries. This is the real deal, a native North American powerhouse. I remember my neighbor once told me, "You're crazy to plant strawberries in your front yard, the weeds will eat them alive." But here's what nobody tells you at the store. Wild strawberry is an aggressive runner. It doesn't just sit there, it sends out stolons, long stems that reach out and root themselves every few inches. It creates a dense, interlocking carpet that is much tougher than it looks. In my old backyard, I had a patch of crabgrass that felt invincible. I spent hundreds on weed killers that just ended up killing my grass and leaving the crabgrass standing. Finally, I cleared a small 4-foot by 4-foot section and put in 10 small wild strawberry plugs. Within 18 months, that crabgrass was gone. Why? Because the strawberry plants occupied every single square inch of the surface. They're like a specialized task force for your soil. If you have kids or dogs running around, this is a great choice because it handles occasional foot traffic much better than most delicate flowers. Plus, you get tiny, intensely sweet berries in the early summer. If the birds don't beat you to them. One common mistake I see people make with these is over-fertilizing. If you hit these with high-nitrogen lawn fertilizer, you'll get massive leaves but very few runners and even fewer flowers. These plants are evolved to live in average American soil. They like to struggle just a little bit. It makes them tougher. If your soil is too rich, they get lazy. My rule of thumb: if the soil feels like a wrung-out sponge when you squeeze it, it's perfect. If it's sticky like Play-Doh, you might need to mix in some leaf mold or compost before planting to help with drainage. Another heavy hitter for those in-between spots, where it's not quite full sun but not deep shade, is the golden groundsel, Pachera aurea. This plant is a literal weed suppressor. It stays evergreen in many USDA zones, meaning while the weeds are dormant in late winter and early spring, the groundsel is already awake and holding down the fort. I've used this to replace huge sections of mulch in my flower beds. It produces beautiful yellow flowers in the spring that pollinators love, but the real value is the foliage. It forms a semi-evergreen mat that is so dense, even the most persistent clover can't poke through. If this has happened to you, where you plant something and it just disappears, it's usually because you didn't check the sun track. Here's a quick tip: go out at 10 a.m., 1 p.m., and 4 p.m. If the sun is hitting that spot at all 3 times, you need the wild strawberry. If it only hits it once, go with the groundsel. I've seen so many people waste $50 at the nursery because they guessed on the light. Don't guess, observe. Your wallet will thank you. But let's talk about the all-weather champion, Pennsylvania sedge, Carex pennsylvanica. If you've ever dreamed of a lawn that you never have to mow, this is the plant you've been looking for. It looks like grass, it feels like grass, but it's actually a sedge. I spent years trying to get shade-tolerant grass mixes to grow under my maple trees, and every year, the weeds would win because the grass was too weak and the soil was too dry. Then I discovered sedge. It grows in soft, flowing tufts that only reach about 8 inches tall. Because it spreads through underground rhizomes, it creates a thick, knitted carpet that acts like a biological barrier. What nobody tells you at the garden center is that while they are selling you bags of dense shade grass seed, that seed is often genetically designed for a climate that doesn't exist in your backyard. The sedge, however, has been living under American hardwood trees for thousands of years. It knows the drill. One big story from my own journey happened about 4 years ago. I had a patch of my yard that was dominated by creeping Charlie, a nasty, invasive weed that smells like mint when you mow it and spreads like a virus. I was tired of the chemicals, so I decided to fight fire with fire. I planted a matrix of Pennsylvania sedge. I didn't just throw them in. I cleared small circles in the weeds and tucked the sedges in. Within 2 seasons, the sedge had woven itself together so tightly that the creeping Charlie simply had nowhere to go. It couldn't find the light, and it couldn't find the space. I won that battle without a single drop of herbicide. But here's the thing, even these tough plants can fail if the ground is so hard they can't breathe. There's a simple mistake that makes these plants stop growing and start looking leggy or thin, and it all has to do with what's happening under the surface. I'll show you how to fix that and how to handle the wet feet problem in just a moment. Alert, and heads up, there's a simple mistake that makes this plant stop blooming. I'll show you how to avoid it in just a moment. The funny thing is, the problem is almost never the plant. It's the pot, or in the case of your yard, the soil compaction. If your native ground covers start looking leggy or thin, it's usually because the soil has become a concrete block. In many American suburban yards, especially in newer developments from Florida to Ohio, the topsoil was scraped away during construction, leaving behind heavy, suffocating clay. When that clay dries out in the summer heat, it chokes the roots. I learned this the hard way after losing a beautiful patch of groundsel in my 2nd year. I thought I needed more water, but I actually needed more air. This brings us to our 4th native warrior, the purple lovegrass, Eragrostis spectabilis. If you have a dry, sandy, or rocky spot where even the weeds look like they're struggling, this is your champion. I call this the anti-lawn grass. While your neighbors are dragging hoses across the yard in July, purple lovegrass is just getting started. It grows in beautiful, tidy clumps, and in late summer, it produces a hazy purple cloud of tiny flowers that looks like a mist over the ground. What makes it a fighter? It thrives in the poor soil that most invasive weeds find too tough. By occupying that difficult space, it prevents hardy invasives like spotted knapweed from moving in. I once had a slope in my backyard that was nothing but gravel and weeds. I planted some lovegrass plugs, and within 2 seasons, it looked like a designer landscape from a magazine. The best part, you don't mow it. You leave it alone. If you try to baby this plant with rich fertilizer, it'll actually flop over and die. It likes the struggle. It's a validator for anyone who feels like they have a black thumb because they can't grow a traditional lawn. You don't have a black thumb, you just haven't met a plant that likes your bad soil yet. Now, if you're dealing with the opposite problem, a wetter area, maybe a spot near a downspout or a low corner of the yard that stays soggy after a rainy week, you need blue flag iris, Iris versicolor. Most people think of irises as delicate garden queens, but the native blue flag is a tank. It has thick, sword-like leaves that create a physical barrier. Invasives like reed canary grass love wet feet, but blue flag iris is one of the few natives that can stand its ground and push back. I remember a subscriber asked me once, "My backyard is a swamp every April, should I just give up and put in rocks?" My answer was, no, put in the iris. Not only does it drink up the excess moisture, but its root system is so dense and interconnected that it stabilizes the soil. It's like installing a natural drainage and filtration system. When you're at the nursery, make sure you're getting the versicolor species. Don't let them sell you the yellow flag iris. That one is actually an invasive from Europe that will take over your whole neighborhood. This is a classic showcase versus real home trap. The yellow one looks bright and inviting at the store, but it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Stick to the native blue. To ensure these warriors win the fight, you have to understand the 10-second rule. Before you plant any of these fighters, you need to clear the immediate competition. You can't just throw a native plug into a thicket of weeds and expect it to win on day one. Give your native warrior a 10-second head start. Clear a 6-inch circle of bare dirt for every plant. This gives the roots time to anchor before the weeds try to move back in. It's the difference between a plant that thrives and one that gets smothered in its first month. There's a simple test you can do right now to see if your soil is too compacted for these warriors. Just take a long screwdriver and try to push it 6 inches into the ground. If you have to lean your whole body weight on it, your plants are going to struggle to fight for you. If it slides in easily, you're ready to plant. If it doesn't, don't worry. I'll show you how to fix that without renting a heavy tiller in the next section. Practical question. You know why this happens even when you water correctly? I'll show you the reason in the next part.